Welcome to Under the Shell, presented by Testudo Times. I'm Brendan Weissel.
Sam Jane.
Michael Howes.
And wow, it's good to be back. For you longtime listeners, you'll probably notice that we are now presented by Testudo Times. Did a little bit of work over the summer figuring out where we were going to be hosting this podcast, and we're glad to have landed here.
Yep, we can't wait to show you guys what this podcast is all about to this new fan base. So let's go.
Absolutely, but the story is not about us. This week, the story is about
the fridge, Ralph Friedgen. This might be one of our best interviews. So we saved it for an episode like this, a very special episode, first one with Testudo Times.
That's right.
So let's get to it.
Take it away.
Our guest is a two-time ACC Coach of the Year, was awarded the AP Coach of the Year in 2001. He led Maryland to their last conference title in 2001, his third all-time at Maryland with 75 wins, and led the football program to a school record 5 bowl game victories. We're pleased to have on arguably the greatest Maryland football coach, Coach Ralph Friedgen. Coach, thank you for coming on. To start off with some recent news, Coach, at the beginning of the summer, it was announced that you're on the ballot for the College Football Hall of Fame. First of all, congratulations. That's quite an honor to receive. Kind of what does that mean for you to receive an honor like that after the career that you had?
Well, it is an honor for me to be nominated. Be a greater honor if I get in. We'll wait and see how that turns out. They should be voting here. The voting is done. It's a matter of selection now. And they're only going to pick 2 coaches out of, I think, 11 or 12 that are up. So we'll see how that goes. I was up last year too, and then, it's just how well you're known as well for being at Maryland as opposed to the national.
I had noticed, in the last couple months or so, you've kind of started a new series on Instagram and YouTube, the Football by Friedgen series. What motivated you to relive those memories?
Well, I was told that I didn't have a big enough social media presence. And my daughter has been trying to get me to do this. Katie, my youngest one, who works for Etsy and is pretty good with computers and whatnot. So she came up with the idea to do this. And the problem we're having right now is she just moved into a new home. My grandchildren have come down here and they're just going back. And now she has all these people from the north coming down to visit her. So getting her time to finish this thing, hopefully we'll start on finishing it next week. But I've broken down all the film. It's a matter of her putting it all together and we kind of just talk off the cuff and then she makes me look good and puts it all in the right places. But it's going over very well. And a lot of people are texting me and calling me and wanting to know when the next installment's coming up. So we'll have to try to get that up as soon as possible.
So where did you kind of, we obviously know you played football, and while at Maryland, you played a lot of different positions. I think I read somewhere that, you played offensive guard, fullback. But how did your football career kind of start? Like, where did that come from? Your dad was a coach, I believe. Like, what did you notice from him? That type of thing.
Well, I came to Maryland as a quarterback, and I played at Harris, New York, and our rival was Rye, New York. And the head football coach at the Rye was John Nugent, and the head football coach at Maryland was Tom Nugent. So they recommended me to go to Maryland. I ended up going there, and then we had Tom Nugent got fired my first year, and Lou Saban came in my second year, and he left to go to Denver Broncos. And my third and my fourth year was Bob Ward, who ended up getting fired. He was a former Maryland player, and then All-American, really. And then Roy Lester came in, and I coached under him for 3 years. And then Jerry Claiborne came in, and I coached under him for 1 year. So, as frustrated as I was playing a lot of different positions for a lot of different coaches, it turned to be an asset for me when I went into coaching. I did student teaching, and I hated it. And I knew I wouldn't. Both my parents were teachers, and I thought that was the way I would go. But once I did it, I wasn't thrilled. I was a good enough student. I went to graduate school, got a graduate assistantship in the School of Public Health, and taught 5 classes, and they paid for my education. And in that time, they asked me to volunteer coach the freshman team. At that time, there was a freshman team. And I ended up coaching the defense. Buddy Beardmore was the freshman coach. He was also the lacrosse coach. So I had a lot of good players. I had, Randy White, Kenny Troy, and Bob Avellini. And I think 7 of those guys played in the NFL that were on that freshman team. And then Roy Lester got fired, and Jerry Claiborne came in, and I was fortunate enough to coach, got on as a graduate assistant with him. So I was a graduate assistant for 4 years. And then learned a lot. And then Bobby Ross, who was on that staff, hired me to go to the Citadel with him as head. He was the head coach, and hired Frank Beamer and myself to go with him.
All right.
So we were making, as a graduate assistant, I was making $150 a month with no room or boards, and that was a little difficult to survive. And then we got to go to the Citadel, and we were making $11,000 a year, so we were doing great. Frank and I were. That was in 1973.
150 a month. That's a high salary right there.
Really?
Yeah.
We only worked about 20 hours a week, 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
If you had to say, from all the coaches that you've played for, coached for, interacted with, which was the one that you would say had the best influence on your coaching career?
My father, probably. My father was very innovative. He believed in multiple formations with as many personnel groups as possible, but he wanted to run the same plays from all the different formations. And back in the 60s, that was like unheard of. And then he kind of trained me, subconsciously. My father was a high school coach, and when I became, probably was junior high through high school, he would get the tickets to either a New York Giants game or to at that time, the New York Titans, which later became the Jets. And he'd get a press pass, and he'd scalp a ticket for me. So we wouldn't even sit together. He played at Fordham, and we would drive to Fordham in the Bronx and then take a subway to either Yankee Stadium to see the Giants or Polo Grounds to see the Titans. And then afterwards, we'd go home, and he'd be asking me questions and kind of educating me without me even knowing it. And I kind of find myself doing the same thing with my grandkids. But, I started at quarterback when I was a sophomore. And I think after the third game, I called all my own plays for my junior and senior years. So, but it was pretty much the plays he would have called anyway. I was so trained by him. But I've picked up, things from everybody I've been with. I think, Coach Claiborne, I was the last guy hired to work with Coach Claiborne as a graduate assistant. Dick Redding and Bobby Ross had to convince him to hire me for the fall. I worked for him for the spring while I was doing my thesis. And then he wasn't going to hire me, and then they went in and actually got him to hire me. But I got all the dirty jobs. I had to go down to DC at 4 o'clock in the morning and pick up the film because he watched it on Sundays. This was Saturday after the game. So I'd be getting up like at 3 or so, and then going down there and pick up the film and then bring it into him. And then we'd sit and watch the film from 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock. So that was an unbelievable experience. Coach Claiborne was a defensive-minded coach, but we would sit there and watch offense, defense, and special teams. And I did that for 10 weeks. He'd go to church at 10, and then I would start in on the game, the scouting reports and everything. And then it was my job before I left the building to check the saunas and the steam room and everything that the wrestlers used. And Coach Claiborne had a deal with Sully Krause, who was the wrestling coach. He'd let the football players use that on Sundays to get a lot of the soreness out, but to make sure I shut it off. And so it was my job to go we were up at the top of Cole Fieldhouse at the time, and where the football offices were, and I had to go all the way down and check if the sauna and the steam were off and not shut it off. And then, so I got out of there about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd gotten up at about 3. So they got their $150 worth just in that one day. So, but it was something I loved doing. You know, you have to understand that, you know, my son-in-law said to me, I don't know how you did what you did. And I said, well, you have to find something you're passionate about. I always felt like my players, I try to get them to find out something they were passionate about, because then it's not work. And no matter how much money you make, if you're doing it and you enjoy doing it, you do it well, you'll make a good living. And that's, once I got into coaching, you know, with the freshman team at Maryland, I knew what I wanted to do. It was just a matter of getting hired. I got turned down from probably 10 or 12 high school jobs and a couple of Shepherd College. I got turned down, a couple of small colleges. So kind of came out of the blue that Coach Ross told me he was going to visit the Citadel, and he asked me if he got the job, would I come with him? They came back and told Frank Beamer what the benefits were. We have insurance and this and that. Frank's looking at me like you're crazy. We're making $150 a month, and he's offering us $11,000 a year. We thought we struck it rich, but yeah, it was. We laugh about it now, you know, after our careers are over. So
yeah, I mean, you truly kind of worked your way up, and you had coached about many different schools and many different positions, but then you kind of always found your way back to Maryland, and then you eventually get the Maryland head coaching job. So how did that come to be that you ended up at the head coaching at Maryland?
Well, I tried to get it when Bobby left. You know, when he left to go to originally he was going to go to the Buffalo Bills, and then at the last second changed his mind and went to Georgia Tech. And then I tried to get it after we went to the Super Bowl when I was with him at San Diego. I thought I would get it, and I didn't even get an interview. So, you know, when I was at Georgia Tech with George O'Leary, we played Maryland. It was Maryland's last game, I believe, and it was our second to last game. We had to play Georgia after Maryland, and you know, I wasn't really paying any attention to Maryland, and you know, we went out to play against them, and Ron Vanderlyn came over me and started going over the whole team. I didn't know what he was. You know, everybody was looking at us like I didn't know what the heck he was doing, and you know, I always was respectful for him. I thought he was always nice to me. I didn't have any problems, but we won that day, and then I guess the next day, Debbie Howe had called George O'Leary and asked for permission to talk to me, and but George said, I don't want you to talk to them this week because we're playing Georgia. And that was always a big game for us. So I told my agent to do all the talking with him. I didn't want to be involved in it. So he called me like on Tuesday and said that they're looking for a head coach. So I pulled your name out of the hat. I said, fine, I don't want to be bothered with it anymore. I'm tired with dealing with Maryland. So then Thursday, she called me up on my phone. I was still in the office. And she said, we're interested in you if you're interested in us. And to be honest with you, I said, you know, I don't need you pulling my chain. If you're seriously interested, I'd be interested. But if you're not, I'd rather not get involved. So she said, I'm interested enough. I'd like to interview you Sunday after the game. I said, where? She said, Marriott in Atlanta. I'll fly down there. She said, what time can we do it? I said, well, I need to grade the film. Probably can do it about 2 o'clock. So I met with her from 2 to about 5:30, 6. She had a plane to catch. I drove her to the airport. The interview went very well. She told me to fly up the next day. Kind of all went down real fast after that, you know.
So that first season with Maryland in 2001, you're now taking over a program that had not had a winning season in over 5 years, and then you lead that team.
16 years. 16 years.
16 years. So then you guys go out and you win 10 games your first season. What was your first steps in rebuilding and kind of reshaping that program to have the success that they ended up having?
Well, there were quite a few things. First of all, we really had an archaic film system that we were about 25 years behind the times.
What was the film system? Just so we because
they were on like Betamax or not Betamax, but it was digital. It wasn't digital. It was like you had the discs and stuff. You just put it in. I had helped negotiate a deal at Georgia Tech to buy Pinnacle, or it later became Exos, and that was over $1 million just to do the digital system. And then the next year, it got so more advanced in 1 year that they wanted us to buy a new one. So I went to George O'Leary, who was the head coach, and I said, they want us to buy another one. So we just spent $1 million on the last one. I said, they'll buy it back. But, so he said, you got to go see Homer. I'll let you deal with it. So I went and saw Homer Rice, who was the AD. And he said, I don't think we can pay cash for it. He said, you think they'll let us buy it on time? So I got to ask. And so they did. And so I had a relationship with these people. So when I told Dr. Yao what I needed to do, I said, I need at least 3 coaching stations. She said, well, if you take the job, we'll get you everything you need. Well, she had no idea of what it cost. So I said to her, all right. And that was the minimum I felt I needed. And so I went to, at that time it was Pinnacle, I believe. And they said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll give you 24 stations for $750,000 if you win, that you endorse us. And I said, I'll do that. So we got probably a $2 million situation for $700,000. And at the coaches clinic, I was their guest, and the line was out the door, around the corner, because they thought I had the secret, But that was one of the things. We had a meal problem. When I was interviewed, the kids weren't getting enough to eat. That was a whole nother deal. I had to get that squared away. And with the help of the dining hall service and Dr. Yao, we were able to solve that problem. So there was, when you take a new job, you add up the pluses and minuses. There's reasons other than coaching why the other guy didn't win. And basically you're going to have the same kids, but so what are the negatives that you can turn around and make them positives, or at least be neutral? And that's what I kind of tried to do. And the other thing was I had to put people in the stands. Nobody was going to the games. And so I tried, my theory was we had such a large contingent of Maryland people in an hour radius of our school. If I could get out and meet the people and convince them of our program, that we would be able to fill the stadium. And, just last week, I learned that the year I left Maryland, of the top 25 biggest crowds in Maryland's history, we had 19 in my era. And then now, I think they've gone to 30, the 30 largest crowds, but we're still at 19. But the 5 that have gone ahead of us are all against Ohio State, Penn State, or Michigan. So you don't know how many people are coming from those schools to help fill the stadium. You see what I'm saying? So I was pretty successful in getting that done too. Now, I also inherited a bunch of kids that were so tired of being 5 and 6 and not going to bowl games that I said this on the show we're doing, that their goal for the first season was to win 6 games, which, to be quite honest, I was kind of crushed that that's all I wanted to win. And but I understood it because 6 wins to them represented a bowl game, and we happened to win the 6th game was the Georgia Tech game, which was a hard game for me because I just come from coaching those guys on the other side, and I knew them like I knew the whole team. So plus O'Leary was a really good friend of mine, and it's always tough playing against your friends. So, but we won that game and we were 6-0, and then I told them in the locker room after the game, time to change our goals, time to think about winning the conference championship, and we were able to do that. And so, the question was, what did you do? Well, I tried to take away as many of the negatives as possible. I was fortunate enough to hire a good coaching staff, and the administration at that time was giving me such support, was really, really, really helpful for us. So we had a good thing going. We had everything pulling in the right direction.
One of the things I've heard you talk about in kind of improving a team, and when you look back at some of the other Maryland teams, is doing things to eliminate mistakes against yourself, or avoid beating yourself. And I know I've heard you talk about that, but what kind of things do you do to like instill in a team that it's important to make plays and truly eliminate all those mistakes?
Well, I can tell you this, okay? 2009, I went 2-10, and we had the highest turnover ratio. I think we were the second highest in the country. Okay, 2010, that was 2009. 2010, we were the second lowest in the country. So that's the difference of what, 7 games? And what I did was, right during winter workouts, we took a towel and we taped it up like a football, and we did drills for 5 minutes every day, how to protect the football, so it became almost instinctive. On the defensive side of the ball, how we strip the ball, how we get interceptions, how all of the ball security things to take away the ball. So you work at it, you make it an emphasis. And when you see a guy run through the line and automatically he moves the ball away from a tackler and has it high and tight, or protects his arm going through, and they do those things without thinking. Or if he's running down the sidelines and he puts the ball in the outside arm as opposed to his dominant arm. So you can do things to help yourself. Now, one of the other things is penalties. Penalties kill you. If you usually win the penalty battle, you got a good chance of winning the game. You win the turnover battle and the penalty battle, you're going to have a great chance of winning the game. Right now, when I talk to Mike Locksley probably once a week during the season, and they have a lot of penalties that's killing them, and that's what they got to eliminate. Now, it's a different day and time. I'd run the team. If a guy had a penalty, maybe it's an offensive penalty, the whole offense would run, because the whole offense is suffering during the game too. And pretty soon you get peer group pressure. You did it today, they'd probably jump in the transfer portal. You wouldn't have a team. But, I wouldn't care about it, because if they're doing that, they don't really care about winning anyway. But, I know Mike talks to me about penalties like holding or clipping or something. Those are penalties. I mean, he says those are going to happen. I don't believe that. I heard the coach of the Giants say that. It must be a Nick Saban thing, because both of those guys coach with Saban. But to me, I didn't want penalties at all. Then I didn't want sacks, and I didn't want drops. Because when I was being interviewed with the players, the best question I got in all the interviews was, one of the boys said to me, "So what are you going to do to make us win that the other coaches couldn't do?" And my answer to him was, "I'm going to teach you how not to lose. Because if you let the other team beat themselves, you're going to gain confidence, and you're going to play better than you had before." It's kind of what happened. Our first game was against North Carolina. The first play went for a 75-yard touchdown. So everybody's going, oh, here we go again. In fact, my defensive coordinator got on the phone and said to me, am I fired? I said, we got 59 more minutes. I'll let you know after the game. So that's the last touchdown they scored. They end up having more penalties than us, more turnovers than us. So we beat them. They were a ranked team at the time. So I think you can coach that. I really do. And Mike still does it. It's the degree of error. 12% is the magic number. If you're under 12%, you usually win. If you're over 12%, I've won, but you usually go, the odds go against you once you get over 12%. And the way you do that is you take the number of errors divided by the total number of plays, and you come up with the percentage. So
you mentioned how you talked to Loxley now about some of the penalty stuff and just general coaching. Do you talk to him a lot about just kind of the team, the program building stuff? I guess has he talked to you about how much maybe the program has changed with Big Ten and NIL and stuff like that?
Well, I think there's positives with the big. I did a guy called me the other day from USA Today. He wanted me to. I think he had the story already written, and he just wanted me to validate it. He kept saying, "You wanted to stay in the ACC." I said, "Yeah, traditionally I wanted to stay in the ACC, but I said financially I can understand why they did, and they have a lot more things now than I had. They've got a beautiful facility. We had trouble feeding them. Now they got what do they call them?" Something station, fertilizer, revitalization stations or whatever. But so they have 29 coaches. We had 9. I mean, it's a totally different thing, and I don't know if it's not a tougher job now because of the NIL and the transfer portal and I talked to Mike I guess it's been about a month or two ago. Said he's out raising money. He says, that's all I do now is raise money. So I used to have to raise money too, but it was for a different reason. I was trying to get us to be a Division I program. I said, you got to, no longer do you talk about getting an education and getting internships and getting a job. Now it's, how much you're going to pay me. And I don't know if that's the right way to go myself, but it is what it is. It's just a different age, different whole deal.
Yeah, that's reality almost now.
Yeah, it is. And, there's two things that, I coach in the NFL too. And at least there was a contract. You know what I'm saying? I said, and what I worry about is, these kids transferring, some of them are transferring 3 and 4 times. Well, every time you transfer, you lose credits. So, now all of a sudden we're not interested in how many graduate, how many of these guys that transfer all over the place get a degree. They made me feel like they don't have a degree, but they're gonna eventually get taxed on this money. And they're also going to get, if they start getting taxed on that, what happens when they start taxing their scholarship? A lot of those guys, that scholarship is probably worth $120,000, $130,000 a year because they go to summer school and they go to winter session, and they get, that's out of state tuition for those guys that are out of state. So that runs up the money pretty good, That's going to happen sooner or later, Then they might all, and then. Now, the other thing I see coming in now these guys are getting suspended for betting because now they got money, and how long does it take before the bad influences start getting involved in that,
Kind of talking about current day now, Loxley and the whole program. Nowadays, you can be seen around Maryland football in the program, but it wasn't always like that after you departed from Maryland. Kind of what has led you back to being around the program and embracing Maryland football again?
Well, I think it was a couple things. Having a senior moment right now. The one coach that invited me back, Durkin brought me back to speak at a clinic for him. And then I think Evans has been a big help in bringing me back. And then, of course, Mike. Mike coached under me, and we've remained close for quite a while. So I really like to see him be successful.
What about, in that, because you had so much success in terms of that, from that like early 2000s era, and you kind of like, you started off super hot and then kind of hit like a low point, and then you kind of brought it back out. What happens, or can you take us through the situations of like, what ended up with you getting bought out and things like that? Like what went down in that situation? What happened? Like, what was your reactions when that season happened? Because I remember reading, doing research that a lot of people were pretty shocked and upset with the decision. Can you kind of take us through, for Maryland fans, what happened maybe?
Yeah. If you'll go back and you'll look at my record, not only at Maryland, but other places, when I've had a quarterback, or a good quarterback, I've been really successful. And not that we weren't recruiting kids, but we hit that midsection where our quarterbacks weren't as good as the previous ones. Kind of lucked into Scotty McBride because he actually transferred and essentially walked on. And then I watched all the tape, and I saw him on the scout team. And I think it was 3 weeks after he was here, I told me to get a scholarship as soon as I had one available. And I think he's won. What?
Scott was on the podcast. He's a friend of the show. He spoke very glowingly about you.
Yeah, well, I was hard on him too. So, but he won 21 games for us. And then actually when Sean Hill, the other quarterback that started the year before, McCoy, he kind of quit and went to basketball. And I just stayed with Sean. And Sean was a winner. I mean, he ended up playing like 13 years in the NFL. And you don't do that. He just wins games. One guy said he didn't like the way he throws. Yeah, I told him it wasn't a beauty contest. It was a guy, how efficient you could be. And that was Sean. He would find a way to win. And we, I just, when I came in, we had a lot of guys that liked just being on the team. They didn't want to work to be a good team. And I never cut anybody. I didn't like that in the NFL, but we had guys that just didn't want to put the work in. And I worked them my first year there. I mean, 24 periods every day. And those kids, they wanted to win very badly. And they were very talented, but it had to be brought out. And we had to play smart football, which we did. And I had good coaches. So, then we lost a couple of our coaches, and that hurt us too. To get into the whole thing with Anderson, I went out to eat with him about, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks before he fired me. He told me that they were thinking of going to the Big Ten. And that I had no idea about that. And he wanted to know what I thought about it. And I said, I didn't think a whole lot of it. But he didn't talk to me about the money situation either. He just said that, and then I think he had other people in his ear. I think there's a lot of people, at Maryland that are still employed at Maryland that were in his ear. And then I think Kevin Plank might have been in his ear. He wanted Mike Leach, and Mike Leach would not have worked out at Maryland, but so, I guess when we beat Virginia, and we were assured of having, I think, at least 7 wins, Anderson came out and said he was going to finish my contract. And then he called me in after recruiting one day and said that he was going to let me go, and they were going to do something else. That turned into a whole fiasco because he told me on a Wednesday night. I did my radio show on Wednesday night. I got up the next morning and flew to Norfolk to recruit Travis Hughes' brother, Trenton Hughes' brother, Travis. And then when I got back there, Franklin was going to leave and go to Vanderbilt. And Anderson wanted me to go on the radio and talk about Franklin. I said, what do we want to do that for? And anyway, I really told him I didn't want to do that. I said, let's just put a statement out. And then he said, he called me up and said that he didn't want me to be on that phone call. And it was one of these, you dialing phone calls. So I was actually on the phone with our SID guy, and I was just, when I would do an interview, I would have the SID guy quiz me, prepare me for the questions that could come up, And so I was getting quizzed when he left a voice message for me. But I dialed into the phone call, listened to what he said, and the first question was, how do you think the season went with Maryland? And that year we were 8-4 at the time. We were going to go to Military Bowl, which we never should have went to. We should have went to a Champ Sports Bowl or one of the bowls in Florida. I don't know what the deal they cut there, but that was a screw up. But anyway, he said, well, we had a good year, but I'm looking to have a great year. That's what he said. So then the next question was, well, how do you feel like Coach Friedgen's going to be? And they said, well, I'm going to talk about that next week. This was like on a Friday. So everybody now, all of a sudden, ESPN's got it on. It just blew up. Now I got a recruiting weekend that weekend. So I got parents. I never had a chance to talk to my staff. So all of a sudden now my staff's wanting to know what the hell is going on. I just think the whole thing was handled wrong. And then, they wanted me to coach the bowl game, which I was happy to do. And then while I'm coaching the bowl game, they're bringing Mike Leach in to interview. And that went over like a lead balloon when the professors and everything started talking to Mike Leach. He started talking how great academically Texas Tech is. I don't think so. So then all of a sudden now he's really out. And so Randy Edsel just got beaten in the BCS Bowl, and he hired Randy. I coached with Randy. I tried to help him out. He didn't want to listen. He said everything I brought up to him was, we did that at Connecticut. Oh, we did that at Connecticut. Fine. Maryland's a different place. That's why Mike has a chance. He's been there. He knows the pluses and the minuses, and so he's the most prepared guy to take that job. Because everybody thinks it's like every other job, and it isn't. So I think you have to have some inside knowledge of what's going on here.
I read that they almost had Franklin, or it was reported that Franklin was kind of the coach in waiting. How much do you think that he was? Do you know that?
Oh, I know he was the coach in waiting. They kind of jumped me on the last one on that deal too. But so I really didn't have a problem. I wanted to coach 2 more years. When we went 2-9, I had 36 freshmen. Okay, 2-10. Then the next year we go 9-4, and I got 36 sophomores. What do you think we're going to be when there are 36 juniors and 36 seniors? You know what I'm saying? And then what happened was they brought in Edsel, and all of them quit or got thrown off the team. There's a couple of guys playing in the NFL right now that you got to let go. So, I mean, all of a sudden, then now they're 2-10 again.
Because Franklin left for Vanderbilt, and then they kind of had to scramble for, Leach was a candidate, but he had just gone through some scandals at Texas Tech, and then they hired Edsel, and then obviously there was a whole run there where everyone was there was no good stretches of Maryland football. Did selfishly, because obviously this is your former program and you were at other places, did selfishly, it felt like kind of validation for you to they didn't want to support me through when I brought them through the good times. And now as soon as I kind of was on the downturn, it was, well, we got to go somewhere else. How much of validation did it provide to you maybe that other coaches were struggling way more than you were? And then, you came back with Rutgers and beat Maryland. What was that like? And what was that stretch of Maryland football like for you from afar?
Well, I watched every game. My wife would not. She went to the movies every Saturday. So, but I followed them. They were my players. You know what I'm saying? In fact, when I went to coach at Rutgers and came back, it was senior night, and I'm sitting up there, and they're all my kids that I recruited. So I'm sitting there going, I should be doing this. These are the kids I recruited, and then you got to play against them, and it's kind of crazy. We're getting our butts beat in the first half, and I'm looking at the play sheet and figuring out how to make a damn first down. And then I look up and I see all these highlights, and what the heck they showing that stuff for? And then I didn't even realize me, but then they told me afterwards that they did a film thing for me, And then, it was 2 minutes to go in the game. We were driving, and we took a loss, and we ended up having a punt with I think there was about a minute to go in the half. And Edsel rushed the punter and got a roughing the punter call. So we got a first down. We were down 25 points at that point, and we went down and scored. So we made it a 17-point game. So I went in at halftime, and I just told the Rutgers guys, I said, look, we're leaving a lot of plays on the field. I said, we got to throw the ball better, we got to catch the ball better, we got to protect better. I said, because the second half, I'm emptying the playbook. And we're either going to get beat real, real bad, or we're going to win this game. And we came out, we returned a kickoff for about 60 yards and got in field position, went down and scored. Now it's a 10-point game. And we had the momentum. And so we ended up getting it there and ended up pulling it out and won the game. And it's kind of interesting because they had the 84 team there. When I was coaching in Maryland, the offensive coordinator under Bobby Ross, and we had to come back at Miami. We were 31-0, came back and won. And all those guys were telling me they were up there in the press box, and they all huddled to one side. He said, "You're going to do it," So they were actually pulling for Rutgers.
That's pretty funny. Was that post-game handshake? Did you go down onto the field and talk with any of the former players or anything, or coaches?
I actually had a couple of players come over to see me, and this is how weird it was. First of all, when I come out of the press box, because I was in the press box, the fans, there must have been about 200 fans just kind of chanting my name. And the Rutgers coach was going, "What are you, a rock star?" I said, "Hardly. They fired my ass." So I said, then I went and did a media thing after the game, and then there were about 3 or 4 players from Maryland that came over to see me after the game, and they were like, "We got to do this quick, coach, because we don't want Edsel to see us because we'll get in trouble," And that's unbelievable, but yeah, I won't say their names because they might still get in trouble. But there was about 3 or 4 of them that came over. And a couple of them I didn't see because I was in the press conference, but Gloria talked to them, But everything I did, he kind of wiped out. They used to have my name for when the coach year on about the 30-yard line, and I was told Edsel got them all moved off. Now they have me over a bathroom, and I think in the far end zone, which is probably pretty apropos.
You kind of talked about, when you were talking about Coach Locksley, about how he understands what makes Maryland different. And I just kind of want to get a perspective from a coach who, played here and now coached there. What is so hard about Maryland for some coaches to understand? Like, why is the job so different?
When I was coaching there, we only got 13 academic exceptions. So out of 25 guys you recruit, 12 of them have to be regular admits into Maryland. Where the NCAA, you had to have a 2.0 and, I think it was an 800 SAT to get into most schools. Now, I think that's changed since I was there, but that's what we were dealing with. you know. There were a lot of other things that really kind of came about, Maryland's history from Len Bias, and they were still there. I was there at Len Bias, 1986. I was in my office at 5 o'clock in the morning when the sirens rang all throughout campus. So, everything changed right after that, football and basketball. But there were a lot of different restrictions that you just had to deal with. I'll tell you this: if a kid had not qualified by the NCAA by signing date, we had to give that kid a letter, okay, saying what he had to get in his spring semester to be eligible to be a special admit into Maryland. So here, picture yourself: you're a Division I player. You got 25 scholarship offers, but you got one letter that has a butt to it. You know what I'm saying? What do you think your chances of getting that kid is? So those are just some of the things that, I don't know if they do that anymore or not, but I know that we had a higher entrance level than any other school in the ACC at that time, and maybe in college football.
Do you think like the area plays a role too? Like being that Maryland is kind of in a unique area that, some coaches come from like Connecticut, or like Durkin came from Michigan, and Maryland's just such a different place in terms of, the support for and where it is.
I learned with Coach Claiborne, you can put people in the stands there, but you not only do you have to win, but you have to be entertaining. You have to be for the entertaining dollar. And some of the things that I would always be amenable to the press. In fact, Heather Denich talked to me when I got nominated for the Hall of Fame. And, we had our kind of run-ins when she was there, but she said, no one does what you did anymore. Because I've met with the press 3 times a week. I met with them on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday after practice in my office. So they had access to me. I would appoint coaches to buy into the opponent's media. And so much stuff that you would get off the internet. People would talk, I would go to practice and stuff. So I told MGM people, I'd let you go to practice. But one thing, as soon as something comes up on the internet that I don't want on the internet, practice is closed. And they were pretty good about that because they know I wasn't fooling around. I think Maryland is better now than in that light because of the Big Ten. In order for them to compete. I try to recruit guys that want to transfer from Penn State. I know this one kid ended up going to Baylor. He was at Penn State for 3 years, and Maryland would only take 3 courses for that kid. And out of 3 years of being at Penn State. So don't tell me about how these Big Ten schools are all, Sammy Maldonado, who came from Ohio State, he had 42 hours they wouldn't take. So he had to really bust his hump to get eligible, So he told me that at Ohio State, the coach taught a football class in the spring, and all they did was put the installation in for spring practice. These are the differences I'm talking about.
For our last segment here, we're going to do our rapid fire segment. We do this with every single guest we have on. We're going to ask you a couple questions. You just give us your quick response, or if you want to give a story, that also works. So to start this off, who was the favorite player you've ever coached?
I would have to say probably Joe Hamilton.
Joe Hamilton. Are there any other ones in your head right now?
Well, I'd also have to put E.J. Henderson right there with him too. EJ was a little different than Joe. There's so many. That's a very hard question for me. Sean Jones was another one. Scott McBrien, Bruce Perry. I kind of treated all my players like they were my sons. So that doesn't mean I was always easy on them.
How about your most underrated player?
No question, Joe Villano. I took him. He was a 2-star kid because he went against this 5-star kid in camp, whipped his butt every time. And the public gave me grief, and the coaches gave me grief, and he ended up being an All-American at Maryland. So,
who was the hardest player to coach against?
The hardest player to coach against? Oh, wow. The hardest player to coach against. Quarterback Rivers at NC State, we beat him 3 times. Ryan at Boston College, we beat him. Wilson, we beat him. There was one other one that played a lot. So we had a lot of success against really good quarterbacks. Probably Peppers, I would say, from North Carolina. Julius Peppers.
Julius Peppers. How about your favorite play call you've ever made?
I would say my favorite play call that I ever made was in the NFL. We were on the half-yard line, backed up, 3rd down and 8, and we hit it for a 99-yard touchdown. And the Stan Humphrey said to me, "I thought you were out of your mind calling that play." So yeah, that was. I think it's still got to be a record. I know 99 yards is a record, but I think mine was 99 yards and 2 feet.
How about your favorite post-game snack?
Whatever my wife was having it would have to be she'd pick up fried chicken. My wife would, she would do these tailgates for everybody, and so she ended up always sending some chicken in for me after the game.
What was the most frustrated you've ever gotten at a practice or a game?
No, anyone we didn't play very well. I told the press, I said, I'm a very emotional guy. You're going to see me very upset if we don't have a good practice. If we have a good practice, I'm probably going to be lighthearted, crack a lot of jokes. If I'm upset about something, you might even see me cry and get emotional. So you just need to treat me fairly and I'll be fine. But yeah, I'm not a good loser, and I'm a perfectionist. So if we don't practice the way I can, my kids, my players will tell you this. If we didn't have a good period in practice, I would say start the period over. They would hear that, and they'd all start singing, start the period over. They still say that. If it wasn't good enough, we did it again.
Did you actually burn your diploma after you left Maryland?
I was on a radio station making fun, and I said, they asked me something about Maryland, and I said, yeah, I burned my diploma and I'm flying the Georgia Tech flag. And the Georgia Tech people picked up on this, and their ingenuity. So they had a thing sent out on the internet with me burning my diploma and the Georgia Tech flag flying behind me, and they sent to all the alumni on that. So that upset a lot of people, but my wife got upset with me. She said, "You never should have said that." I said, "Well, I'm waiting to tell them I'm going to burn my 2 kids' diplomas too. So just relax, So you got to have a little color in your life, right? I mean, I just got fired. Why can't I say that?
I thought it was hilarious when I read the clips. I thought it was a great joke. I just want to know, to add on to Mike. So we got worst locker room, opposing team locker room.
Oh, I can tell you that. There's a couple of them. There used to be Virginia was the worst. Now they redid their stadium, but it was so bad you couldn't dress in the locker room. It was that small. And then I don't know. I haven't been to Duke in a while, but Duke used to have a bad one too. They had the 2 worst, I think, in the ACC. And Maryland's visiting team is probably the next worst.
And then what was your favorite win when you were at Maryland?
My favorite win was probably the NC State game or the Georgia Tech game. Just by the way we won the game, The NC State game we didn't play really well, especially the first half. And I was worried about that because we had beaten Clemson and we assured ourselves a tie for the ACC. So if we went down and got beat by NC State, we still would have been a tie for the Atlantic Coast Conference. But Florida State had beaten us, so they would go to the BCS Bowl. I wanted to go to the BCS Bowl. So I would say that game was was pretty rewarding. Yeah.
And then in the old ACC, what was the coach that you had the best relationship with, and then the worst relationship?
The best relationship, I would say the guy I was at Duke, but Cutcliffe we had a very good relationship. He and I, Bobby Bowden, I wouldn't say I had a bad relationship with him. It's just that he never call me by my name. He always called me Bubba, and even when I was coaching, I was a coordinator, he'd say, well, Georgia Tech's got a good coordinator. Bubba's over there is pretty good, And so they'd ask me about him, and I'd say the old man, So we kind of went back and forth. And then after I started going to the Peach Bowl because I won the Bobby Dodd Award, and he was there one day, and he called me Ralph. And I said, that's the first time you have ever called me by my first name, other than Bubba. But most of the coaches in the ACC, probably Al Groh was the one who really I probably didn't like the most, to be honest with it, just because he's a Virginia guy. And he tried to pull all kinds of, he when my first year back, Maryland hadn't beaten Virginia in 10 years, which I find really hard to believe. And we beat them that day. And then the next day, we go down there to play. And I don't really like going out and meeting the coach before the game, but I do it because it's traditional. And he wouldn't come out and shake my hand. So I told my wife, that's the last time I will ever go out to shake his hand, ever. And then we had a game against them in Maryland on a Thursday night. And in fact, this is coming up on the series. And it was like 15 or 16 wind chill factor. There was a 40-mile-an-hour wind. And he was going to outsmart us on it. He won the toss and elected to take the ball. No, he elected to kick off. So we're going to get the ball both times. So he figures he's going to kick it with the wind. He took the wind. That's what he did. So he took the wind. I took the ball. And he was saying, okay, you're not going to be able to drive the ball against us because you got a 40-mile-an-hour wind and it's 16 degrees out. The only problem was we went 80 yards and scored a touchdown on them. Now, by the time the quarter changed, now I had to win, and we went up 14-0. We ended up winning that game. And that was also the Gladiator game. That's a whole other interesting story. But we started off that year. We lost to Northern Illinois, and then I think we lost to Florida State early, and then we were like 1-2, and we started getting going after that, and we were coming down to this big game with Virginia. Chess Atkinson, who was a place kicker for us in the 80s, was also a TV guy, and he did Fridge TV with me. I was kind of doing podcasts before podcasts were podcasts. And I don't know if you should look up Fridge TV sometime and see a lot of stuff too. But he said he had put together this film of our season, and he wanted to show it to me. And he showed it to me, and I was really moved by the film. So I said, I'd like to show this to our team before the game, but I don't want to interrupt our normal schedule on a Friday night. So I said, we'll come in and eat, or we'll come in and sit down and eat, then we'll get up and we'll show the film and we'll go back and eat. So we do that. The kids get up. No one made a sound at all. So I think this thing went over like a lead balloon. In fact, it was eerie, nobody said anything. So we went through the whole Friday. At that time, it was Wednesday night because it was a Thursday night game. We go to the stadium. We're going to go down Terp Alley, and I get off the bus, and about 10 kids come up to me. They go, Coach, can we see that tape again? I said, you want me to show you the tape now before the game? We got to see it again. So I called Jess up, and I said, they want to see the tape again. Is there any way we can show this in the locker room? So he goes in and he rigs it up where they're watching this thing in the locker room. they come out, and I coached for 43 years, and I don't think I had a team that fired up ever. In fact, if you go to YouTube, I try to look that film up. The only thing they have on film was after the coin toss, our whole team rushes the field. And they told me that, because I talked to Karam Koch about this, they told me they were going to do it, and I told them I didn't want them to do it. They didn't care. They went out. We got a 15-yard penalty. And which really worked out because Al Groh took the wind, and they moved the ball to the 50-yard line, so it was kicked out of bounds anyway. So we got the ball on the 20-yard line. But we were both sides of the ball, kicking game. We were like fired up, especially the first half. Then we had a little low in the third quarter. Then we picked it up in the fourth quarter. But I'd like to show that film on Football by Friedgen and show how the kids played. And I talked to Jess, and he has pictures of them watching the film in the locker room, which we'd like to put up on the thing too. So it's a little coming attractions. I think the kids will get a kick out of it too. And Scott McBrien was on that team, so you might ask him about that if you see him.
So to finish off the rapid fire, it's Maryland's last season, maybe in the traditional-ish Big Ten before who knows how many schools get added. Could you give us a record prediction for the upcoming Maryland season?
Well, I looked at their schedule. They should do, if all things go to plan, they should win the first 6 games, as I look at it. And then they got to stay healthy, because down the stretch they got the real tough games down the stretch. And I believe, and I told Mike this, what has to happen for Maryland to punch through is they got to beat Ohio State, or they've already beaten Penn State. They can beat Penn State, Ohio State, or Michigan. And they have to do that by not making the key mistakes. If they'll do that, if they'll let Ohio State beat themselves, and it can be done. I would be using the Ohio State game where they went for 2 and didn't make it, that they can play with Ohio State. I'm a great guy, and I'm saying, what's it going to take to motivate these guys to be ready to go? I would think about that during the summer and make notes for each game and start building on that on Monday of that week. So by Friday, they were fired up, ready to go, And that's what they got to do, because right now they got to have confidence they can win in that environment, in that game.
So what's the number? What are we looking at?
Yeah, I think they got a good chance to win 8 games.
Okay.
Between Ohio State,
they got the quarterback back. It's going to be how well the Lions hold up.
Yeah.
Between Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, do you think Maryland is going to take one of those games?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you heard it here first.
I would say I think they can take 2 of them.
Well, Maryland fans would certainly be happy to hear that. We were obviously happy to hear stories from you. So Brendan's going to wrap it up for us, but just wanted to say thank you for hopping on.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you for having me. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, Coach, thank you very much. We appreciate your time, and we'll keep updated with the Football by Friedgen series, and thank you very much.
If listening to one of the best coaches in all of Maryland history doesn't get you fired up for this season, I don't know what will, boys.
Yeah, football's back. It's in the air. Fall's around the corner, and I think this year is a year that Terps fans can get really excited for their football team, because this could be Mike Locksley's best team that he's had here in College Park.
It absolutely could be. Although, losing a lot of seniors and a lot of people over the offseason to the transfer portal and just to the draft and all types of things, I think will make some of the first games harder than some people may think.
Yeah, I think having that kind of easier way into it with Towson, with Charlotte, Virginia's going to be terrible. So I think those first 3 games, I think having time to kind of gel and maybe you can work out some stuff that you might not if you had a tough non-conference opponent will definitely help them.
And listening to quotes from this team from the offseason, they're ready to compete with the rest of the Big Ten. They believe they belong in that upper echelon of teams, and it's going to be exciting to see what they do. I remember Talia at Media Day, he said that they think they can compete for the Big Ten title, and that's the expectation. I know Coach Locksley reiterated that same message, and it's going to be exciting to watch.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that Coach Friedgen talked about was getting over the hump. You know, he talked about it now with Locksley, as Locksley knows this place. You know, he's done a good job kind of invigorating the program, but it's kind of been still a struggle against the Penn States, the Michigans, the Ohio States, and you know, Coach Friedgen thinks they can get 2 of them. He said,
he gave a bold record prediction.
Yeah,
so
I mean, that was kind of wild. So, but it'll be interesting to see if they can get over that hump, because obviously they get Penn State and Michigan at home. Ohio State's going to be tough on the road, but potentially stealing one of those games, I think that would really signify to College Park that Maryland is on a really high trajectory. And in the spirit of that, Brendan, Mike, and a little preview for the season. We're not fully in there. This Saturday's the first upcoming game against Towson. I have some categories and some questions for you guys. So we're going to go back and forth. I'll ask a question, one of you will answer.
Game on, Brendan.
And we're going to see...
winner take all.
We're going to see what you guys are thinking. So for one, Mike, I'm going to ask you, we're going to start off with a big question. Does Talia Tagovailoa finish as the best quarterback in the Big Ten?
No.
Oh, you'd say no. So what's the reason? Because he's kind of heading into it. Him and J.J. McCarthy, I think, are pretty close. But statistically, Talia is the highest productive returning quarterback.
I just think he's too inconsistent when it comes to big games. We've seen in the past he struggles with interceptions. Will that problem come back again this year? Who knows? I know he lessened it last year. It was about like 8 interceptions, but it's still a problem that has bit Maryland football in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing to look forward to is he did play well in the big games other than Penn State when he was injured. Michigan played well. Ohio State played very well. But I think I would agree with you, Mike, the verdict on that. I think J.J. McCarthy finishes as the top quarterback. For Brendan now, does Jayshon Barnum make the first team All-Big Ten as a linebacker this year?
I'll say no to that as well.
No to that as well. Barnum's going to have to be good this year, so what do you think? Is this a sign that Maryland's defense might take a big step back, losing, obviously, Bennett and Banks?
I don't know if it's necessarily that. I think that he's clearly the defensive focus when you look at other teams, scouting the Maryland defensive pass rush and secondary and just Maryland defense in general. He's going to be one of the main focuses, so I think that they're going to put a lot of pressure on him, and other people are going to have to step up and take part of the load. So I don't think he'll have quite as big of an impact in year 2.
I got you. I respect that. I think that Barnum is going to be their best defensive player, but I can see why other linebackers might get the notoriety. Okay, we've had 2 no's. Mike, here's a question for you. Does Maryland enter into Columbus undefeated and potentially ranked? They have 5 games before that, I believe. It's Towson, Charlotte, Virginia, I think Indiana, and then I don't remember the
Michigan State is between Virginia and Indiana.
Michigan State. So those 5 games, do you think they head into Columbus undefeated?
Yes.
Yes. So are they ranked at that point?
I think that they might win all their non-ranked games this year.
So that's what you're thinking. You think
yeah.
So you think they're potentially 5-0 heading into Columbus.
5-0, yeah.
Maybe trying to take down the Buckeyes.
If there was a game that I think that they'll for sure lose this season, it will be that one.
Ohio State.
Yeah.
So that leads into my next question for Brendan, and it's a big one. Brendan, does Maryland do what they haven't done in the past and pick off one of the top 3 Big Ten teams? Do the Terps beat Michigan, Penn State, or Ohio State?
I'm gonna say no to that as well. I know that they're gonna give all those teams a good run, but I just don't think Maryland has it in them this year to have enough firepower to get over those teams.
Okay, so do you think which game is the closest?
Michigan
at home? I think I agree with that. I think Michigan...
End of the season.
In between, for Michigan in their schedule, they play Penn State, then Maryland, then Ohio State.
Trap game.
I think if they win one, it's Michigan at home. And then now, in the spirit of friendly competition, I want to hear both of yours record prediction and who your team MVP is this year.
So how many games are there?
There's 12.
12 games.
Not including a bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
Brendan, you want to start us off?
I'm going to say 7-5.
Wow. Big step back. Before you say team MVP, what's the main reason?
I know a lot of people have been very high on this team, but until I truly see it on the field in some of those bigger games, I don't see why they're going to really outperform themselves last year.
I don't hate the idea of them taking it. Losing the O-line, I think, could be a bigger thing than people think. And then who's your team MVP?
Roman Hemby.
Roman Hemby. Okay, Mike.
9-3. I think they win every single game other than the ranked ones. Maybe they steal one of them at home. And then for team MVP, this is going to be a sleeper one, but I think Jaquan Shepard, he's going to be starting cornerback. He's coming in, taking over for Deontay Banks and Jacorian Bennett. This is a situation he's been in the past. At Cincinnati just last year, he took over after starters Sauce Gardner. You might have heard of him. And Kobe Bryant were drafted, so he's prepared for this situation. Got all AAC last year, so I think it's going to be surprising and interesting to watch him.
I think Maryland has always had very strong cornerbacks looking at the past 6 years in terms of getting drafted into the NFL.
The pass defense is not like, it hasn't correlated, which is so weird.
That's what, like, they have good players. They have good people to put up good numbers and be very strong in the gym. But on the field, their smarts, their ability to make huge plays, they're just not there.
I think the pass rush, too. When's the last time a Maryland other than Ngakoue, was the last one that was a notorious...
Or made an impact, yeah.
Yeah, that made a notorious play. Chop Robinson transferred to Penn State, so I think the pass rush also has to do. But not to get sidetracked, my record prediction, I'm going to split the middle. I'm going 8-4. I think they lose all three, and then they drop one of the games that, you know, Maryland always seems to lose, like a Michigan State on the road or something like that. And then my team MVP, Brendan stole mine with Roman Hemby. So I'm just going to be basic and say, or actually, you know what, I'll change it. I'm going to go Bo Braid. I think that he could have a really good year. Safety. I think he could be in the top 3 rounds drafted.
Sleeper pick to Corey Dyches. He
Corey
could have a
Dyches
big
could have
year
a
this
huge
year,
year.
especially with the pre-leaving. He was second on the team
Yeah.
for receiving yards and touchdowns.
Dyches could, I think he could have a huge year. And
he
he's
could
that
have a pretty
athletic
good year.
tight end that always seems to thrive. But that's football. First game this Saturday, Towson. You know, College Park will be bumping for that one. But there's sports that are already in play right now. And one of the teams who is returning a lot and is having a pretty good start to the year is the men's soccer team. They are starting some young people. Brendan, we know that you are kind of our guy for soccer. Tell us about what you've been seeing from Sasha's squad.
Yeah, Sam, I've watched both of the Maryland soccer games so far with a close eye, coming in so far with a 1-1 record. Dropped the first game, looked very flat. Maryland came out with very little energy. You know, a lot of these guys, they played together, probably in practice and throughout the spring, but they had never been on the same field together in a competitive game against a strong team, and I think you saw that in the first game. And second game, they came out significantly stronger, had energy from the jump. No one scored in the first half, but second half played significantly better, got multiple chances on goal, and finally 2 of them hit the back of the net. The theme for this season is definitely going to be, you know, Maryland is still ranked preseason the top Big Ten soccer team, but I still kind of consider it a bit of a rebuilding year with losing so many people to the drafts. And so I just think it's going to be hard for them to make a huge impact in the tournament, but they'll still win a lot of games and be a fun team to watch. This upcoming Friday, playing Wake Forest at home. Wake Forest comes in at 1-0-1. Always a strong team. Going to be a tough name. Like Sam said, the key to this year is it's going to be a lot of freshmen. Started 4 freshmen at the game on Sunday, so it's going to be a lot of learning. But I think they'll be a team that can win a lot of games.
Yeah, I think, like Brendan said, I think this is going to be a transition year for them. Obviously, they have, you know, players who were in a decently sized role last year. Colin Griffith, Max Riley, coming back to this year's team. But when you're bringing in so many new kids, especially early on in soccer is such a chemistry, dependent game. So I think that just you got to give this team time if you're a Maryland fan. You know, maybe I think towards the end of the year they could really start to round into form because they always recruit well and they always bring in talented kids. But it's just going to take a little bit of gelling for their unit. It's kind of the same with the women's soccer team. When we look at this squad, friend of the pod, Coach Megan Ryan Nemser, they are 0-1-3 on the season, which is a very similar trend to last year when they drew 1 million games. So they've tied 3 times and then obviously
Sam wishes
lost.
he was exaggerating there.
Yeah, not an exaggeration. But they just tied again 2-2 to James Madison recently on Sunday, August 27th. It's been kind of a weird start to the season. They've really struggled on offense, only scoring 1.25 goals a game, which is pretty low, obviously. But their defense has been very solid, only allowing 1.5. You know, saves have been up, 18 saves on the year. And they're really just kind of playing that slow, grinded out game that I think is not limiting the offense, but that's the type of style they want to dictate because I think to be honest, Nemser knows that she doesn't have the talent to compete and play in a high, up-tempo game. So I think she kind of wants to bog the game down a little bit.
And top scorer from last year, Hope Rose, is back to her scoring habits from last year. She's leading the team in scoring again, but they are missing a couple guys from last year. They're missing BB Donrat, Riley Donnelly, Emma de Burndine, Danny Van Rootselaar, and Leah Kraus. There's 4 grad students and 1 senior out of that bunch, so they are missing a lot of experience this year, but Hope Rose is back, top scorer, so we'll see where that team goes. And I think it's going to be the same story as last year. As far as this offense goes, the team will go. The offense is going to be the strong suit throughout the whole season.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. I think that when you look at this team, it's always year in, year out, consistently ranked in the top 10, top 5 in the country. It's just really making sure that you're following through on, the late prowess of the season when you hit the tougher teams. And their offense obviously kind of fell off towards the end last year. So maintaining, high goal scoring will be important.
Mm-hmm. And being able to maintain a defense, too, to back up that high scoring. Because you can score as much as you want, but if you can't play defense, too, there's an issue.
Got to strike a balance for sure. And as we head into, fall, one of the sports that I think sometimes people forget is in the fall is volleyball. And it's a squad that is starting out, pretty decent. They've struggled in recent years, but that's the volleyball team. Brendan, what have they been up to?
Yeah, Sam and Mike. Adam Hughes definitely on the hot seat. No,
he is?
I'm only kidding.
Once again?
No. For listeners, last year we'd always talk about kind of how the Maryland women's volleyball team is very good out of conference, and in conference they truly struggle. And what does that mean for coaching security? And that's the exact same pattern I think we're going to have this year. Maryland doesn't face a ranked team until 3 weeks when they face off against Purdue, but that is when the challenge really starts in the Big Ten. That's where all those ranked teams are. Maryland's ranked 9th in the Big Ten preseason rankings, but looking closer ahead in the schedule, they have the Kristen Dickman Invitational this weekend in Annapolis, facing off against Old Dominion, Utah Valley, and Navy, and I would expect Maryland to take all 3 of those games. They're going to have a strong start before they start facing Big Ten play, probably have a pretty solid record, only a couple losses that I see in there, but as soon as you face the Big Ten, it's going to be very tough.
Do you see them having a positive Big Ten win record here?
Above 500, I would say that's going to be tough. I'll say I think it'll be close. I think it'll be like 390.
And then the end of the year, will they be above 500 or not?
Yeah, I think they'll finish above 500 because they're going to win a ton of their preseason games. Or preseason meaning pre-Big Ten games.
Correct.
A lot of the teams they faced were, outside of the top 50 overall teams last year. And so, this team, it's solid, but it's really hard to win a lot of games in conference when every night you're kind of getting, in a sense, beat up by the top 5 teams in the country. It's just hard to gain a lot of momentum when you're going in and losing pretty handedly.
Yeah, I think that this team Hughes has got to find a couple big wins is I think one of the big things is you really, even if you're not, dominating in Big Ten play, showing progress, showing signs that you're able to compete against them.
Exactly, and they did that a couple times last year, and I think doing that is how you build a program. I mean, it's not that no one's really going to expect you to go from the 9th team in preseason rankings to win the Big Ten. I mean, that would be an insane story, but you can expect to slowly over the years make progress and go up that ladder.
Definitely. And now, that wraps up all of our fall sports, so we got to talk about the summer.
It's true. We missed a lot of stuff that went down in the summer. The biggest thing that I was seeing on social media, and hopefully we'll get someone in studio to talk about it, is the Italy trip that the men's basketball team took to kind of integrate some of those transfers and freshmen.
Yeah, obviously this team had a huge news with Jameer Young coming back, Donta Scott coming back, Hakeem Hart really the only starter leaving, and Don Carey. But, bringing in some transfers, Jordan Geronimo, a couple of stud freshmen, Jamie Kaiser apparently had, and Deshaun Harris-Smith had disgusting trips in Italy.
The reports were saying they looked strong, although you never know.
You never know.
You never know.
And that's what I think we'll have a guest in here to maybe tell us a little firsthand about what they saw. But if those two can come in, Mike, and play a prominent role, how big is that for this team?
I think that there might be no more court stormings in the future just because of how good Maryland basketball will be.
Stole my line.
Oh, wow.
I did?
I said that all the time last year.
Do you want to add on? What
I think this team will be ranked in the top 15 for most of the season.
Right. So both of you are extremely high on them, and I'm sure that College Park, as much as they love football, basketball is what they look forward to. So basketball, back in swing, Italy trip was big. But actually the most successful team potentially in terms of conference success was a team that faced some bad news in the offseason. The baseball squad lost in their regional, but won the Big Ten, won the Big Ten tournament even.
Definitely a success there.
First time ever.
Of course, but then a blow that none of us really saw coming. Rob Vaughn gone to Alabama. Mike, you covered baseball last year. Did you know about this? Were you surprised? Take us through what happened.
So, first and foremost, if you're a Maryland baseball fan, you have to hope that this is the last time in a while that there will be a coaching change, because it's just been one after another of coaches using Maryland as a stepping ground and then going elsewhere. But Coach Rob Vaughn, he had been talking to teams in the offseason before, and, as Damon Evans said at Swope's press conference, they were prepared. They had a succession plan in place, but you had to know that this was going to come at some point with Vaughn. He's getting paid $900,000 annually in his new contract at Alabama compared to the $300,000 he was getting paid at Maryland. So there's a big difference there, and then conference strength and how good the facilities are. There's also the disparity there. So this was going to happen at some point. Happened last summer, and you got to hope Swope, who's the Maryland man, he grew up here, he played here, he coached here under Vaughn. You got to hope that he's just going to stay here and cement his legacy at Maryland.
Mike, I got to ask you, if you're on the baseball team or you're a big fan of it, is it frustrating to see Vaughn take other players?
I mean, the big name that's coming to me now is Ian Petrutz. And Petrutz, if he had stayed, he would have been a big part of this Maryland lineup. Most likely would have been the 3-4 hitter. So that's got to be frustrating if you're on the team. But at the same time, they have leaders on this team who stayed. They have Kenny Lipman, who's going to have a strong role in this rotation. They have Kevin Keister, who's going to be the shortstop. So they still have guys here.
Hakopian, too.
Eddie Hakopian, and his brother transferred here. So they still have guys, and Swope is building his program. If those guys want to go out to Alabama, that's fine. Swope will keep his guys in-house, and they'll build Swope's culture.
I think that it's just like if a coach can leave, it seems like a player should also be able to
absolutely.
leave. But for fans, I totally get like Rob Vaughn preached how much he loved Maryland, all of this type of, flowery talk, and then the second you leave, you're trying to purge players, basically.
Right. And there was another coaching change in the offseason, too.
Yeah,
softball
from
coach.
one diamond to the next. It's going to look very different in the spring. What do you see there, Sam?
Honestly, I was pretty surprised. I covered softball last year for the Diamondback, and it was honestly one of the more surprising news of the offseason. Montgomery had just came off their best season. They were clearly trending upwards. I hadn't heard any whispers of, any sort of resign or anything like that. I had heard some stuff about, players potentially leaving the program, but didn't really think anything of it. And then Montgomery just decided to resign due to personal reasons. I'm not going to speculate. I don't know anything more than just the press release, but they've been pretty tight-lipped about it, and I think as Maryland kind of searches now, they're still looking.
Yeah, they still right now have an interim, so yeah.
Have not. I mean, I think Damon Evans was pretty shocked by it too, from what you can gauge now, in that they don't have a person in waiting. They clearly don't have somebody that they were set on once Montgomery left. I think this is a pretty big blow to the softball program, and I wouldn't be surprised if they took a step back this year.
Have players transferred out? Has it been? They have.
But it was mostly before Montgomery left.
So do you think they knew beforehand something was going to drop, or
I don't.
Just
I mean, I don't know. I'm not gonna. That's
Right.
just best guess. I don't really know, but most of the people that transferred out, I had an idea that they would transfer.
It's going to be a tough year for Maryland softball.
They bring back players, which is the thing, but just
it's so hard to recruit.
To have that type of thing drop just in the off season when stuff is happening, and you feel the players have to feel like we had this momentum. We didn't make the playoffs, but this was our first time making like the NIT of softball in a while, and then your coach just resigns. It's got to be like a blow, and then you're gonna have this in this fall. There's a transfer portal window. Coaches are gonna be asking Courtney Weish, Jada McFarland, Megan McCamey, hey, you don't have a coach. Why don't you come play for us? Montgomery already talked about how schools were recruiting Jada McFarland while he was there. It's only going to increase. So I think I agree with Brendan. We'll have to see who they end up naming, but
any player who was going to commit is now seriously questioning it. It's just going to be tough.
Yeah, it'll be a tough year, but in my opinion. But that's all of our hits from the summer, and now we're back to the fall and back to one of our favorite segments. That's our college football picks. So basically, each of us make 3 picks a week surrounding spreads, over-unders, money lines, whatever you may have it, and then we are going to keep track and at the end of the year reveal the records. Last year, Mike took home the crown.
I think I still owe Mike his prize, so I'll get on that.
You do owe me my prize.
We do owe Mike his prize, but listeners, if you guys have any picks that you think we should add to our hypothetical cards, then let us know in the comments of our tweets or the comments of our episodes. So Mike, you won last year. Get us started with week 1.
All right, so to start this back-to-back campaign, I'm going to take Alabama favored by 39 points against Middle Tennessee. Alabama will absolutely destroy teams at the beginning of the season. And then Utah State underdogs by 25 against Iowa. That seems like a pretty big number for Iowa to be favored by. I just kind of don't respect that football program. And then last, I'm going to take Colorado, the underdog, by 21 against number 17 TCU. Them as a 3-touchdown dog in Deion's first game seems like a lot.
Yeah, I don't hate any of those picks. Bama always seems to roll week 1. On to mine, Fresno State, Purdue, over 50.5 points. Both teams score a lot of points. I'm excited to watch that game. And I just think that one's going to easily cross that threshold. Hudson Card at Purdue. I think Purdue could be a sleepy good team this year. And then I have South and North Carolina in a little not interstate, but bordering state conflict, over 63.5. Drake May, Spencer Rattler, 2 of the top quarterbacks this year. I think that game's going to be super fun to watch, so make sure you tune into that one. And then East Carolina covering 35.5 against Michigan. East Carolina's actually didn't have a terrible season last year, and Michigan is without Jim Harbaugh. They always tend to kind of start off slow in week 1 when I've watched them. I'm going to take the Pirates to cover 35.5.
Good picks by Sam. Now we're moving on to some picks that might be a little more questionable
Just
for our audience.
Just to let the podcast audience know, if you didn't listen last year, Brendan is notorious for picking random games, and he usually is right, and then sometimes it's just for a bit, but they're all electric to hear.
So I got Salisbury plus nothing. First game I'll pick is BC minus 8.5 against Northern Illinois.
I like that.
BC should really beat up on them. Early season game, they should be fired up. Second game, I'd like to take Miami minus 17 over Miami.
Which one?
I'd like to take Miami, Florida. I was thinking if anybody would pick onto that. And then this one I feel very confident in. UMass plus 36.5 over Auburn. 36.5 is so many points. And UMass won last week, so they're fired up.
Go UMass. Go Minute.
I mean, they might be 2-0 again after they play Auburn.
Beating Auburn. War Eagle, more like War Minutemen. So that'll do it for our college football picks. And now our final segment, fired up that it's back. Terrific Terp. Basically, again, we're just going to tell everybody, if for new listeners, Terrific Terp, every week, Brendan introduced a Maryland legend of the past that might be kind of unknown, but their stories are pretty incredible. We've had some amazing stories from boxers to famous golfers to coaches to dual sport athletes. It was a wild ride, and this week, nobody better to do it than Mr. Weissel. So take it away, Brendan.
Bless us.
It's been a long episode, so I'll give you a nice, quick Terrific Terrapin. This week's Terrific Terrapin is Alfred Duke Wire. Although Wire never scored a touchdown, hit a home run, or scored a goal for the University of Maryland, he was pivotal to the success of the sports teams. That's because from 1947 to 1967, he was the head athletic trainer. Wire was influential in helping open Byrd Stadium while also helping the football team to 4 top 5 finishes during his time. He was a trainer for the 1953 National Championship football team, and he was the head trainer for the United States Naval Academy team during the 1960 Olympic Games held in Rome. He was inducted into the Helms Athletic Trainer Hall of Fame and the Maryland Athletics Hall of Fame. However, his greatest achievement that is still recognized today is from the Duke Wire shoulder vest, a protective device for football players to use against shoulder dislocations and separations. So whenever you see football players out there wearing those pads and wearing those sockets and wearing those types of things to keep their shoulders in place, that was all Wire.
Maryland's had some great trainers. We brought in Tyler Cronin.
I was about to say, we opened last year with a trainer as our first interview.
We
opening with a trainer for Terrific Terp.
I was trying to go for someone fun. We had some people have been calling her the GOAT, Irene Knox.
But yeah, it's been a wild first episode. Really cool interview with Coach Friedgen. We're excited football's back. We're excited that all the other fall sports are back. And most of all, we're excited to be a part of Testudo Times and kick this awesome season underway. So thank you again for listening. This was Under the Shell, Season 3, Episode 1. Have a good night.